So, thank you again for joining. I know everyone is extremely busy between like work and family and school and life, and so I appreciate you taking an hour to spend with me today. Hopefully, a little bit less than an hour. Um, my name is Chris Casado. For those of you who haven't met, I'm the co-founder of TSX Challenge, and we organize inspirational backpacking trips to the Sierra, the Grand Canyon, and a few other locations more recently. We had our first trip actually to New Mexico. That's a preview of something else coming. We do some work on the Lost Coast in California, and right now we're excited to share with you a little bit about Baffin Island. Now, we did a soft kind of introduction to Baffin Island in in November of this past year. And very fortunately, 32 people um, go ahead and click the box and put the small deposit down as an indication of interest. And these are the 32 people that are kind of at the front of the line at the moment for what we're doing at this time. Um, we're really excited to have the 32 people on. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we're going to try and organize this. I know this is a big commitment, and this is why we're kind of like planning it kind of a year and a half, 2 years in advance. So now we're looking for this is a trip for 2026. We also plan to have a trip for 2027. Based on kind of demand we see right now, we plan on having at least one trip, hopefully two trips. And frankly, if everyone signs up, we'll talk about three trips. We'll see if that works for this year. But our intent is to get at least one, hopefully two, and maybe a third. Again, this is a bigger experience though. So I'm not really sure how this is going to land. I'd like to share more with you guys about this today. How this trip is going to be organized, these are our tentative dates for next year. The two trips that we're planning initially would be trip number one, which would be the July 31st to August 13th. Roughly, this is like a 14 plus day trip. And the second date will be the 14th to the 27th. So these are the two dates. I would say this is plus or minus. There are a couple of variables that could still take place. One is Canadian North, which is the airline that we'll be using from Ottawa to get to our northern Arctic gateways. They haven't released their full schedule yet, so that might impact how we do our scheduling. We're working with them, but it's usually about a year in advance. So that may impact it. We don't expect it to, but that could make an impact. And then there's always some other uncertainties as we get closer, but this is generally speaking the time frame that we're looking for. Um, a few other things to note is what would be included in this type of experience. So this is kind of a full expedition style experience. When we get to Ottawa, we're going to have a one night stay at the hotel in Ottawa. This is going to be our meeting point. We'll have a welcome dinner to welcome everyone there. We're going to do round trip flights from Ottawa, which is going to go two flights to get to our starting point, which will either be Kit or Pang, and we'll talk about how that works out. And then we'll do flights back as well. In addition, we have all kind of accommodations lined up. So we're going to have accommodations lined up both at our starting Arctic Gateway and Kit or Pang, and then where we end. All the boat transfers taking place, all the land transfers, all the meals taking place once we're kind of in the Arctic area. So all that's taken care of and covered. There's also some park fees, which are not trivial, that we take care of as well. We'll have a couple guides on the trip, lots of living experience, and all the meals, etc. So that's kind of like the basics of how we're going to be organizing this trip. For tonight, what we'll cover is a few things. Like, first of all, what's so special about Baffin Island? I'll give you a little bit of orientation, like where we are, where this location is, and kind of how we're thinking about it. We'll talk about logistics, gear, and safety. And then we're going to talk just a small snapshot of what life might be on the Auyuittuq Traverse. Auyuittuq. Who is here? Who's going to help me with this pronunciation? Where I have it here. On the Traverse. We'll talk about some important dates, and then we'll go from there. Auyuittuq. Thank you. So first of all, how did we get here? So I know many of you are experienced travelers and adventurers, and we've been seeing more people like this on our trips. People who go to Kilimanjaro or Everest Base Camp. Some people are traveling to Peru and doing Machu Picchu or Mont Blanc. And many of you have sent us pictures like this with the TSX shirt with Mount Everest in the background, which we love. It's awesome. The shirt has also made its way down to Patagonia and Cotopaxi in Ecuador. But when we thought about like where else could we go, we like to do things that are a little bit different, things where we can add a little more value and maybe excite the senses in a new way. And so we chose Baffin Island. And if you've never heard of Baffin Island, you're not alone. Very few people have. It is becoming more on the radar, but you get views like this. This is towering granite, just as we're hiking through receding glaciers. You can see this is Mount Asgard from the highway moraine, actually, as we're hiking through the Traverse. You also get some deep remote valleys and rushing rivers. And here you can see Mount Thor in the distance, the largest sheer granite face on Earth. You get some beautiful midnight cotton candy skies. This is closer to the exit near Pang, where we'd be camping. And then you get some deep valleys with just expansive tundra. There are challenging aspects of this as well. There are lots of stream crossings, or glacier crossings, I would just say, and the streams change on both a daily and kind of annual basis. So it can change how we float the best places to cross. The weather may have an impact as well on the timing of how we do these crossings, because this is kind of like a wild and evolving and ever-changing terrain. And this is kind of the excitement of going someplace new and going to the Arctic. I just want to touch base real quick. Is Ken on this call? Ken, if you're here.
Hi, Chris. I am here and very much enjoying your presentation.
All right, which Ken is
Uh,
that here?
this is Ken McDermott here from
Awesome.
Canada.
Awesome. So Ken is working with us here as a kind of our local guide and local experience. And it's awesome to have Ken out here with lots of love and experience in this area. So uh, I'm not sure if you can see him on the screen, but we might refer to Ken here and there on occasion. So in short summary, this is kind of like the short snapshot of Baffin Island. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions initially, and then we'll talk through some orientation. But let me just tell you like how we got to this point. So small orientation. I grew up in Clovis, California, which is right here. I'm coming to you from the Bay Area tonight. So this is like a stone throw away from me. The question is, how does this kid from Clovis, California, make his way up to like Baffin Island? Why is this even on the radar? This is a pretty far distance away. If I was from the north, maybe that'd be different. And our story, if you're new to TSX, is we started back in 2011 by just doing one route. It was a week-long hike across the Sierra to Mount Whitney. In fact, we continue to inspire people with that same route this up to this very day. We have 5 trips going across the Sierra to Mount Whitney this summer. We added the Grand Canyon back in 2015. It was, first of all, a fifth grade teacher who introduced me to backpacking Mount Whitney, a good friend who introduced me to the Grand Canyon. We currently have 7 different routes that we organize in the Grand Canyon to all the most remote, least traveled regions. But really, it's kind of the people who have been like inspiring me. We didn't plan on growing a guiding business or a backpacking business. There were a couple good friends, Jan and Mark, who were like, "Hey, Chris, where else can we go backpacking?" So in 2017, 2018, we introduced something called Hell for Sure. And then as we were out learning about this Hell for Sure area, which is in the Central Sierra, there's this big burly mountain called Mount Goddard. So we added a trip out to Mount Goddard in 2019. And then we've kind of just been rolling since then. We've had something called the Escalante route based on feedback from a good friend, one of our guides, Tolman. A good friend, Dave, and another Dave who've been backpacking with us helped me discover something absolutely beautiful called Tehipite Valley, which we added in 2022. Dara, who worked with us for a while, gave me some inspiration on getting to new areas in the north rim of the Grand Canyon. We found the Lost Coast recently, about 2 years ago, and added the trip up there, something a little bit easier, something a little more entry level, but something still remote and beautiful. And then most recently, Dirk and I, who is out on the canyon right now, Dirk is actually doing this route at the moment. He's doing a rim to rim route where we actually float across the canyon river. And so we had something called the Rim to Rim Extreme Challenge. So all of these people have had an impact on me, and by extension, hopefully having an impact on others in our community. And the most recent person who had a pretty big impact, and I'm not sure if she's on the call tonight, she's actually preparing for a trip that goes out tomorrow, is Alyssa. Alyssa's been working with us for the last 3 or 4 years. She comes to us from an adventure traveler across the world, but she has some experience in the Arctic. In fact, she's done some training up north in the winter times, and she's been to Baffin Island a handful of times. She came back to me, and I shared with her a little bit about my background and how I found out about Baffin Island. And she encouraged me to, Chris, we should try this out. So a little bit of background of my story. I actually lived in Toronto, Canada for about a year. This was kind of in the late 90s. And around that time, Toronto, the Nunavut was becoming kind of an official territory of Canada. So it was like, in the news, on like the CBC, like on the stations. I remember watching these like documentaries about like Baffin Island. And I was blown away. Like the beauty, the remoteness, like I'm like, that is something I had to like go check out. I remember back in the day, I actually wrote like a message or a letter back in the day to the Park Service. They sent me back a hard copy pamphlets. I have them in my drawers here to this day. But Baffin Island has always been in my mind. And I'm super excited that we're able to kind of bring this to fruition with Alyssa's prodding and Ken's help these coming years. So Baffin Island is kind of like in the far northeast corner of Canada. You can kind of look at it as being across from Greenland. And the area that we're going to be talking about here tonight, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. It's kind of going to have these like 3 major destinations here, where we have Iqaluit, And can you help me with the pronunciations if I'm getting it right, wrong or right? Pang and
Perfect.
cool, Pang and Kit. So these are kind of our 3 points of contact that we're going to have um, when we're going up to Baffin Island. We'll be flying from Ottawa to Iqaluit, and then either from Iqaluit to Kit to the north or Pang to the south, depending on which direction we'll be hiking. Now, the traverse um, is roughly speaking about 60 miles long, or 97 kilometers. We're going to be switching over to kilometers and some metric for Canada up there. Completely wild. And you might think, why is it going to take so many days to do a traverse like this? Why do we have a full 2 weeks to do 60 miles? That's because there's some padding on the front end, there's some padding on the back end. There's also some variability that can take place. Weather can blow in even during the summer months, which can change the dynamics. We might have to labor for a day or two if needed. The streams can be rather high and dangerous, so we might need to wait for colder times in order to cross the stream safely. All of these things may take place, and what we don't want to do is miss our flights. So if we miss our flights getting out, we'll be out of luck. So there's a little bit of padding baked into this itinerary, which enables us to kind of take it at a more moderate pace, possibly get in a day hike or two along the way, but also ensure that we can kind of get our transportation on both ends of the hike. Hopefully that makes sense. And the hike should be absolutely gorgeous. Any questions about orientation, where we are, where we're backpacking, the locations?
Hey, Karen here. I have a question.
Yes.
Um, if I go on any trip, I would like to take a lot of pictures. So in that area, how do you get the power? I mean, I can bring a power bank. It won't last for that long, right?
Yeah, if you bring a power bank on any of our trips, generally speaking, if you have an iPhone, it can last kind of 3 to 4 days if you put it in low
Can't
power,
hear you, Chris.
low video. I'm sorry. If you do bring a power bank, you can have one full charge. If you bring, roughly speaking, 32 milliamps, we'll get you through one full charge for a typical iPhone. If you bring something more than that, that's great. But we can talk about that separately as we get kind of closer to the trip and make sure we have enough power to make sure you can take the pictures that you need.
Thanks.
Yep. Cool. Keep the questions coming. I'm going to touch base on logistics and gear, and then we'll open it to more Q&A, I think, at the end. Logistics. We're going to be getting to the meetup point, which is Ottawa, Canada. So this is where everyone's going to fly into. And we have people coming from across the country or possibly internationally for this trip. We'll do an evening dinner as a team dinner. We'll do a pack check. This is also what we'll be distributing some gear if you do need it. We'll take care of lodging in Ottawa as well. And then the following morning, we'll be hopefully packing up and heading out on the first flight, the first leg to the Arctic gateways. Everything that's kind of included in this trip, we try and make it as easy as possible to kind of join. So again, all the permits, the guides, the backpacks, tents, sleeping bags, pads, etc., that you need. If you do have your own gear, you're totally welcome to bring it. Just keep a few things in mind that you roughly need about 65-liter capacity or better if you're going to be kind of on a trip like this. Pack weights are expected to be incrementally heavier than we typically might have in the Sierra. That's because the gear is a bit more robust and we have a longer duration. We're discussing some ideas for maybe doing caching over the winter months. That is still TBD, but expect packs to be 50 pounds plus, give or take, in terms of like your initial outset, and that will go down over time. But these are heavier packs to start with. The sleeping bag will be rated at least like 20 degrees Fahrenheit or better, or roughly negative 7 degrees Celsius, if you're going to be bringing your own. Based on kind of the feedback we've had from people who have done this hike, we're also suggesting people consider taking hiking boots as kind of their primary footwear, and then possibly having a full toe, closed toe stream crossing boot as well, like a trail runner or something similar for crossing streams. We expect to have like up to like 10 plus, roughly speaking, major stream crossings along this trail, like you might see here, but or maybe more intense. Cool. More logistics. Here's a quick picture, again, the snapshot. How are we going to get there? This is, roughly speaking, flying from Ottawa. We're going to fly to Iqaluit. Then we fly up to Kit. We're going to hike down to Pang. And then we're going to fly back to Iqaluit and then back to Ottawa. So this is kind of like the journey in total. I would say that we're planning 2 trips. And the first trip, we're going to plan from Kit to Pang. And the second one will be in reverse direction from Pang back to Kit. So that the first dates will be one direction, the second dates will be in the opposite direction. A few other things to note. leave no trace. We practice kind of adult time. We're going to leave things as clean, if not clean, as we found them. This is pristine area. One unique feature of backpacking kind of in this Arctic terrain is that you don't have to dig a hole. You can just surface poop. Like number two goes right on the surface. They don't want you burying it into the tundra. It won't, nothing will happen to it. So it's going to be right on top. We will have inReach and both satellite messaging available when we're on the trail as well. Wildlife. This is a common question that comes up in terms of wildlife. I'm gonna let Ken basically. Ken, what kind of wildlife would you expect to see if you're on this trip?
You know, Chris, there's not a lot of wildlife expected
Right.
on this trip. The Arctic bee, which you see in this scene up there, some birds, but it is not a wildlife trip so much as a scenery trip. There's not a lot to eat up in this fjord, and so we should not go there to see that. We are in polar bear country, so there's a chance, but the best chance would be on the boat trips to see those. And whales, narwhal, beluga, bowhead frequent those fjords. That's what the Inuit people would hunt mostly, would be whales, seals, walruses. So there are some amazing marine things to see. But on the trek itself, bees, bunnies, maybe some geese, not a lot of wildlife expected.
I'm okay with that, especially if it's the polar bears we're going to be avoiding. So that's how we kind of like. Um, we'll talk about other items that we have here, other risks which we kind of hit on, in terms of the trail, weather, transportation. And I think I mentioned just kind of like the buffering that we have built into this trip to kind of manage some of this risk. Any questions on logistics, gear, kind of safety? Cool. Let's just talk about a little bit life on the trail. And so this is a quick overview. If you see on the left, you have an elevation profile. The elevation is not too dramatic compared to a lot of other things that we do at TSX. We have, roughly speaking, a 1,600-foot net gain, another 1,600-foot, roughly speaking, net loss. That's of course going to be a lot different as you go plus or minus and up and down. In total, roughly speaking, according to Gaia, you're going to be roughly speaking 6 to 10,000 feet of elevation gain and loss over the course of the 2-week exposure on this trip. From a day-by-day basis, day zero is going to be kind of arrive in Ottawa, kind of our overnight, get to know each other. The first flight will take us 2 hops till we get to the full name is laid out here, but I guess the more easier way is just Kit is where we're going to be headed out to. We'll have lodging arranged that first night, a little bit more orientation with our Arctic guides. And then the next day, we'll be moving our way and beginning up, roughly speaking, a 2-hour hike, a 2-hour boat ride up a fjord. And we'll begin our hike, moving inland to get off the shore to kind of avoid the kind of the higher risk of more polar bears. The next couple of days, we'll be hiking. This is just a small snapshot of what you might expect to see on a few of these days if you're out there. With luck, on day 5 to 7, Mount Asgard will begin to kind of.
Yeah, this is really near to kind of the top of the pass.
Top of the pass.
The Owl and Weasel valleys, the summit of this trip is kind of this lake that uniquely it flows out both sides. And so the highway moraine, it's an enormous glacial moraine. You hike across it for about a whole day. It flows off this Penny ice cap. The Penny is one of the largest ice caps in the world. It's kind of just one notch below. We've got the ice sheets, like the Antarctic and the Greenlandic ice sheets. And then the other biggest pieces of ice on the planet are these ice caps like the Penny. So one of the biggest moraines flowing off of it below Asgard. You traverse that, and that's kind of the view you might have on a good day up there. It's a special place. You can see Thor and Asgard in this picture, actually. Yeah, pretty amazing. The huge view you're looking down the South Penrhyn Fjord.
Thanks, Ken. Eventually, we're going to be coming out the other side. So this is the multi-night trip. 10, 11 days later, we'll be coming out. on the other side and making our way back towards our exit, which is Pang. So small snapshot of some of the scenery you might be able to see out there. Any questions kind of about life on the trail? Pause there for a second.
Chris, you know, I saw a great question in the chat about the bear stuff, the bear spray rifles. It's a Canadian national park. Firearms are generally not permitted, but bear spray is something we bring. It's not obligatory for everyone to bring it, but if you wanted your own, it would be offered. But we would have some in the group, and then some other bear deterrents like bear bangers, some pyrotechnics kind of thing. But you know, the biggest, best defense is not being in the prime bear habitat, hanging out on the coast. They're mostly busy eating seals, the marine mammals, so being inland is good. And being in a large group is also a good defense. But yeah, no, we wouldn't have a firearm, and there would be some other bear deterrence is generally the plan.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about this in terms of like, there's some of the planning that goes into place in terms of being safe out there, keeping clean camps, how you kind of organize your tents and your camping situations, make sure you're camping off the water, etc. Cool. Any more questions? Kind of gear, logistics, safety. All right, let's talk about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Chris, I have a question. This is Kevin. I am curious about what kind of tents are required. Is it just a 3-season, or do you need something that's a little more rugged, stronger?
I'll let Ken take this one, Ken.
Yeah, a great question. The biggest issue we encounter is the wind. This is a windy place, a big, deep fjord. So the brand tent that we have chosen for these is Hilleberg. They're a really great construction, really resilient to the wind, and we're kind of using their 3.5-season model. So I actually use them for winter base camp expeditions up in Canada here, but we're not going with the full heavy 4-season model they have. It's not cold enough to need that in the summer. So if you want to get specific, we're generally using the Hilleberg Nalo and Namaj models. And they come in a kind of 2- and 3-person model. We generally like the 3-person for 2 people with the expedition gear fit there. If you're with your lover, you could go with, or you're small, 2, you could share a 2-person, but it's cozy. So yeah, these are a little bit heavier than what TSX tends to use in the Sierras, but they're really resilient, great design, easy to set up. We really like them, and in particular, they do great in heavy wind.
Great, thank you.
Missed the answer. You probably provide the answer to that already. Is that 1 person per tent, or it's shared?
Our suggestion is to share the tent. It's a long trip, and we're pushing the limits of what works for people with the pack weight. So sharing the tent is the recommendation. It's not a requirement. We can give individual tents, but our suggestion is if you're taking a solo tent, you should bear the extra weight for that. And we can talk about whether there's an additional cost for that with Chris. There might be a small additional cost for it. But yeah, our strong recommendation is sharing because of the weight and how that can mean extra edibles to make you happier. And sharing a tent keeps you warm and makes you a good friend. And if you wonder if there's a polar bear outside, your friend will tell you, no, it's cool. It's not.
Do you have the weight of those tents?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I think they're about 6-7 pounds.
Am I to understand you're supplying the tents then?
That's correct.
Correct. The tents will be included in the trip, and either waiting for you at destination, or depending on the numbers, maybe some will fly up, but probably they're waiting for you from in Pang or Kick. And we just did a little quick research. We think the 2-person model is in at 5 pounds for the the 3-person. And, we're saying we generally put 1 person in a 2 and 2 people in a 3. You could be more economical if you wanted to, but with the, we're going to the Arctic, right? So there is just a bit more on the gear list in terms of puffy coats and hats and mitts and stuff like that you might not need it all the time, but you probably want it when you're going for 2 weeks. So that's part of the thing with the heavy pack weight as well versus in the Sierras or the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, understood. Thanks.
And I did see a great question about the elevation gain loss. Chris did a good job of summarizing the overall. Yeah, you're roughly climbing 1,600 feet overall, and most of the when we've done it on a watch, it's been about double that with the micro terrain. So I think overall climb you can expect around 1,000 meters or 3,200 feet kind of gain loss. So not significant, but yeah, it's a little bit when you got a big pack on, of course.
And then what kind of temperatures should we be expecting?
Excellent question. The neat thing is you're crossing the Arctic Circle, and so you're going to have really long days, and it can get warm in the sun. I'm going to talk centigrade Celsius here first, and then I'll try a brief conversion for you. But daytime highs around 10 C and lows around 5. So a narrow, 10 is 10's 50 and 40, and then you factor in the wind. You're kind of going for like a late fall Sierras climate, maybe up high there, something like that. If it rains or snows, it can snow every month of the year. It is cold, and you add in the wind. But sometimes you have some pretty nice sunny days. I've hiked in my t-shirt a few days up there too.
Quick question. How much mileage do you think on average per day?
So it's paced down to about like 6 to 8 miles a day, roughly speaking. Is that right again? I think that's how we.
Yeah, I like that answer, and when we're fresh with our heavy packs, maybe a bit less. And as Chris mentioned, we've built buffer in. So if we are gifted smooth sailing through the Arctic airports and the Arctic boat shuttle and get in on time, we'll probably have a couple or a few opportunities to do short days and do side hikes. Or sometimes the rivers tell us it's time to set up our tents and cross that river early the next morning because it's looking a little bit high this afternoon. But yeah, the average is 6 to 8, but that disguises the fact that we've got some extra days in there. And often we start slow and speed up as we get lighter.
Cool. Great questions. And thank you, Ken, for all the feedback. Yeah. I'm going to switch gears and just talk about kind of how we're going to organize this. We have a lot of interest and a lot of demand for this trip at the moment. We have 10 participants per trip, so up to 20 participants in total, tentatively. If we organize 2 trips, it may just be 1. We'll see how it works out, and maybe there's opportunity for more. The first 20 people who are kind of like on the list, you guys are kind of like the first priority. Your names from the beginning. I'll put your names back at the end, and we'll also send you an email here shortly this evening and let you know that hey, you're on the first 20. Everyone else, we still want you to kind of like sign up and be there. Let us know if like you're committed, you want to be there. We don't expect everyone to kind of like sign up. We know this is like a big commitment, a long thing out. Hopefully people just had some interest, but we're not really sure how this is going to play out. So we encourage you to kind of like sign up. Even if you're unconfirmed, we'd like you to kind of like make the deposit and let us know if you're interested. In terms of the pricing, we've done the best we can to kind of like make this work. If you were to look at like an Arctic expedition, for like a 2-week Arctic expedition, in some of like the higher priced areas, it's going to be from 12,000 roughly speaking to 24,000. These are kind of like larger, all in kind of inclusive experiences. Our target right now is going to be roughly speaking 10,995 for like the full experience. And for the Baffin Island, trip, if you were to kind of like pay in advance or pay in full, but roughly speaking, the end of this year, it'd be $1,000 discount. So the all-in is roughly speaking just below 10,000 for a trip like
That's US
this.
dollars?
That's US dollars. So we'll try and be as communicative as possible, but roughly speaking, registration is open for the first kind of 20 people to have a confirmed spot. Registration is also open for anyone else who would like to join and just be first on the list. That also kind of begs the question of what happens if you're on an unconfirmed spot and you make a deposit. So if you're on an unconfirmed spot, you will immediately convert to confirmed as soon as the space opens up. Like if you have a deposit on file, it will immediately convert to confirmed. You can also remain on the wait list, until space becomes available. If we do end up having a third trip, we will let you know, and you'd be first in line for that as well. In addition, you would also have priority access for 2027 experiences. So if we go and we plan on running this in 2027 as well. So you'll be first in line if you kind of have your deposit on file for 2027. You will also be first in line for new releases, and we have something pretty exciting we're working on for November release of this year. And we'd love to kind of like have you on board if that was your preference.